Hello, what about you? It's the 18th of August 2024, which of course means it is time for
Heroes of the Week!
Yes, believe it or not, I'm being positive 2 weeks in succession. Don't worry. This won't keep up, and I'll be back to my usual grumpy, negative self very soon. But this is a bit unusual because what I'm talking about this week is a patient's view of our NHS, me being the patient. And so to set it up properly, you're going to have to indulge me in a little bit of anecdotal talk because I'm going to be talking about an adventure I've had over the last few months. But to set the scene properly, we have to go back, way back in time. Way back to the late 70s when I was a teenager. This was a time when we had 3 television stations. Women drank little martinis, and there was an ongoing civil war. Now, like a lot of young men, I took to sport as an alternative to other adventures. But not being particularly bright, the sport that I chose was powerlifting, or as it should really be called, how to cripple yourself in 3 easy lessons. Now, no disrespect to powerlifters. I love powerlifting. It was my life, and I understand the mentality involved. Indeed, I was perfectly proportioned for the sport. I was being not very tall. I was about 5'9". I was very broad, and I was ridiculously strong. So by the age of 17 or so, I was already outlifting most of the men in the gym where I trained. I had one defect. No, I had many defects, but this was the big one. I've had a lifelong problem being told what to do, or indeed taking any form of instruction. So what my way of doing it was I would train like a lunatic for a few months before competition, enter the competition, win or wherever it came, and then I would just drift off for another 2 or 3 weeks, sit at home, eat ice cream and watch television, and then go back to the gym and expect to pick up where I'd left off. Now, I had a wonderful old man, a man called Alec, who was my trainer, who was a gentleman of the highest order, and Alec spotted what I was at. And he gave me a bit of advice which has haunted me my whole life. Because he took me to the side one night and he said, listen, son, listen. This game isn't about ability. You've got buckets of ability. This game is about stickability. Of course, I didn't listen, to my cost. So a few months after that, I was doing my favourite lift. There were 3 lifts in weightlifting. You have the bench press, you have the back squat, and you have the deadlift. My favourite was the back squat because I've legs on me like a horse. Now, I can't remember exactly what was on the bar this particular night. Most weightlifters exaggerate, you know what I mean? But I know for certain it was over 400 pounds, right? And I was doing reps of 3. And I had 2 catchers, right? The catchers are guys who stand at the end of the bar and they keep an eye on you in case you trip or you fall or something. Then they catch the bar. Unfortunately, on this particular night, these 2 chaps got distracted. Nobody's fault, but that's what happened. They wandered off. And I went down and came up for the second rep and the bar bent. Maybe just by a millimeter. You wouldn't have noticed enough, but enough to pull me off balance onto my toes. Now, this was a very old gym, and health and safety was decades off. And some idiot had moved the squat bar to the worst position it could possibly be, a matter of a few inches away from a wall. Do you understand? So I'm on my toes with this 400 pound on my back at the top of my neck. Now, I had the wit, thank God. I had enough intelligence to know if I try to throw this bar over, right? Sort of curl over and jump out. When you think if my head hits that wall, then it will be exactly the same as going through a trap door. It will break my neck like a pigeon's. So I had no choice but to basically use my back to straighten up. Not a good idea. I felt a twinge. All right, I felt a twinge. But then most weightlifters know we spend our lives hurting ourselves. We spend our lives pulling muscles, straining muscles, having these things. It's just part of the game. And I didn't think it was any big deal. I thought it was just another wee twinge. Little did I know that wee twinge was to result in about 4 years of continual torture. Complete and utter torture. Because what had happened was I had burst the bottom 4 discs in my spine. The pressure was so heavy of the vertebrae coming down that they burst the discs that cushion in between the spine. And then that popped out, and that then hit on the sciatic nerve, and that was very, very sore. That was very, very sore. Now, today, this would result in an MRI scan, which didn't exist back then. Back then, you had things called myelograms, where they injected a dye into your spine, which then they x-rayed, but then, of course, that dye made you feel like you were dying for about 4 days after it. And there maybe would have been an inch, with its keyhole surgery in those days, inch incision, and you'd been sent your way, Bob's your uncle. But me, no. I had 2 myelograms and 2 laminectomies. Laminectomies were the slice you open and get the disc out. Why 2, you say, Jake? Why 2? Why not 1? Well, being the lucky sort of chap that I am, the surgeon in the first operation, he got the wrong disc. There was 4 of them out, and he popped the wrong one. So I ended up back and waking up with a hole in my back, which, as we can say, is not an inch long. That's not an inch long. That's 8 inches long. And the pain's still in my leg. So I had another operation a year later, and thankfully that worked insofar as most of the pain evaporated. And while pain has been a constant companion of mine for the last 40 years, I've been able to lead a comparatively normal life. And that's been brilliant. Do you understand? I've always had a very simple motto. I knew myself that I had to keep moving. So my thing was, if you can't run, walk. If you can't walk, swim. If you can't swim, then do press-ups. But keep moving, people. And that's what I kept doing. For the last 15 years, my form of exercise was trekking over the Cave Hill 3 times a week, which I enjoyed greatly. And it worked brilliantly. It kept my weight off. I was halfway fit. That was until 3 months ago. And I take some comfort. I wasn't doing anything stupid like moving boulders or lifting logs or any of that stupid. I was just walking along after my trek, and I felt a twinge in my back. From nowhere, the twinge again. And the pain was back. And it began to increase. And it was so bad, one Tuesday, I ended up having to go to the Mater A&E unit. And about 2:30 in the afternoon, I was triaged after about an hour and a half, and they sent me around a corridor to sit. Now, everybody's got a bad back. Do you understand? We've all got bad backs. But when you have a back injury, like people like me have back injuries, it means you can only sit for so long, and then it becomes intolerable. You then have to toddle about and try to walk that off. And then that becomes intolerable. And then you lie down for a while until that becomes intolerable. So that was the cycle I was in until 12:30 that evening, when I decided to go back round reception and see maybe they had forgot about me. I was told that as I was not designated as an emergency, I was looking at another 5-hour wait before someone would be able to see me. By that stage, I was both physically and emotionally done. I had to go home. My GP has been brilliant, and he realised I needed an MRI scan, but was sad to inform me that if I was going to get it in the NHS, I'd be waiting 18 months for an MRI scan. I had taken out a wee bit of health insurance many years ago, and I was able to get it within a matter of weeks. And before the critics all launch in, "Hey, you're a hypocrite, O'Kane, taking private health," let me explain to you. I am self-employed, like a lot of people. There is no sick pay for me. There is no sick time off for me. If I don't work, my family don't eat. So that was an insurance so that I could continue to work. Now, I have to say, getting the help I needed from my health insurance company proved anything but straightforward, and that may be a video for the future. But got the MRI, went to see an orthopedic surgeon. He looked at the MRI scan and said, yeah, there's a disc pressing on your sciatic nerve, and you're going to have to get a cortisone injection. And I said to him, "Doctor, can you not operate?" And he looked at it. He looked at this here, and he went, "Mr. O'Kane, no orthopedic surgeon is going to open you up again. We have a saying for what your spine now looks like, and it is spaghetti. Spaghetti," he says. That's not heartening people when they say that. My spine inside looks like spaghetti. But I went home anyway, knowing that I was going to get this injection in a couple of weeks. But again, being the lucky sort of chap I am, The very next day, my back went completely gone. You know what I mean? Now, only here do we describe it like that. Well, my back's gone. Where'd it go? Don't know, but it's gone. Oh, let me tell you, I am very good with English. I am very describing things and explaining things. I cannot describe the level of pain I found myself in. All I will say is Dante didn't discover all the circles of hell. I fought hard against calling an ambulance because my generation, unless your leg's hanging off, you're not going to call an ambulance. But when I began passing out due to the pain, others called the ambulance thinking I was having a heart attack. And they arrived, God bless them, with 3 wonderful paramedics called Stephen, Audrey, and Lara. And it took them an hour to get me from my bedroom down the stairs into the ambulance. And they saw me at my very, very worst. Oh, believe me. There was no John Wayne with me. You'd have heard me screaming at Belfast docks. Now, I was taken over to the RVH hospital. I then spent 4 hours in that ambulance waiting to be admitted. And during those 4 hours, I went through 3 cylinders of gas and air and all the morphine you can give a human being up to the point of killing them. My trolley was then pushed into a very large room, which was not a ward. It was like a holding pen for patients who were wheeled in. There must have been at least 30 other patients on trolleys in this large room. And there was not an inch between the trolleys. I'm not exaggerating here, people. The trolleys were stacked, almost touching. When a nurse needed to get in and talk or treat to a patient, they had to pull one of the trolleys out to talk to the person or treat the person that they needed to get to. Anyway. I was very fortunate in that there was a lovely nurse called Chrissy, and Chrissy kept a watchful eye on me and all the other patients during the night. And how she did it, I do not know, because she did the work of at least 6 nurses. Eventually, the next morning, I was moved to a ward 12 hours later. Understand? 12 hours. So it took 16 hours from me arriving in the RVH to me seeing a doctor. And wouldn't you know it, as soon as this doctor saw me, he realized that the analgesic pain relief wasn't working, and he changed me on to other medication, which worked within an hour, right? Worked within an hour, and I was out of the hospital. The reason I tell you all this is because I'm old enough to compare what the NHS once was and what it has sadly become. Way back in the early 80s, when I had my back operations, I was on a ward with 5 other patients. That ward was overseen by a matron and was more than adequately staffed by both nurses and doctors. Once my injury had been identified, my operations occurred within weeks, not months or years. And after the operation, I remained in hospital until I was fully recovered. This is what the NHS was meant to be. This is what it once was in my living memory. But this is what successive both Labour and Tory governments have destroyed. My heroes are the GP, the paramedics, Stephen, Audrey and Lara, and the nurse Chrissy, who all went way above and beyond to treat me. For instance, those 3 paramedics in that ambulance, well, they were supposed to get off 2 hours after we arrived at the hospital, but they had to stay with me for the 4 hours, which meant they were 2 hours overtime. I don't think they get paid for that. Can you imagine one of your MLAs spending more than 2 minutes longer than they had to and not getting paid for it? I would love to end on a positive note, but as you know, I'm a realist, not a fantasist. So here's my advice, people. Don't get sick. Whatever you do not get sick. Our NHS is no longer on its knees, it's on its back. And our accident and emergency units wouldn't look out of place in a war zone. And none of this is accidental. As I've said, it has been political policy for decades to deny the NHS the funds and resources needed to operate at even a basic level. Why? Because the private health industry is sitting waiting to take your money. And while I was able to pay for the diagnostics I needed, I'm aware hundreds of you watching this are sitting at home in pain, unable to do the same. And that is a disgrace in one of the richest nations in the world that is pumping out more millionaires and billionaires every year. Why? Because they don't pay their taxes. They do not contribute. What's the answer? I don't know. But I can tell you some things that aren't the answer. No flag, nor march, nor thuggish racist attack on immigrant health workers will aid our cause. Indeed, if the moronic thugs, racist thugs who've disgraced our community over the last few weeks succeeded and managed to drive from these shores all our immigrant health workers, there would be no NHS. Do you hear me? There would be no A&E units. When your grannies were sick, you better be able to treat them because there'd be nobody there to do it. So let me finish by putting this in language you people may understand. Wise up, you brain-dead wankers.
I know. There's no need for that. There was no need for that, there was no need for that.